This is Jeff Mucci with RCR Wireless News. We're here at the world headquarters of RCR Wireless News with Jim Patterson. Jim, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for letting me come.
Well, we're here at the grand opening of the official grand opening of the RCR ATX Studio Lounge, and it's the home of RCR TV. It's also the home of RCR Wireless News, and we like to call it the engine for creating content, distributing content, and creating some networking. We've got Jason Marchek up in the audience from Kern Analysis. We got our friends here from JMA and Freescale, and we're really delighted to have you here. For those of you who don't know Jim, Jim is a contributor to RCR Wireless News. We post up every Monday. You're the columnist for My Sunday Brief.
That's
every
right.
Sunday, and you're up to how many subscribers?
Oh, we get a few thousand hits a week, so it's good.
That's great.
It's good.
And Jim and I have known each other since, I think, 1997.
That's right. Been a few years, Jeff.
You were a 20-year veteran of Sprint.
I was 12 then, yes.
12?
I was 12, yeah.
President of the
Young
Sprint's
whippersnapper.
wholesale group. And then you started Mobile Symmetry.
I
sold
did.
that to Reliance Communications.
I did.
And now you're CEO of Patterson Advisory Group.
I am. Work a lot here with Austin companies, and it's a very nice facility.
Thank you. Well, today we're going to talk about how to stand out at your company's strategic planning session.
That's right. Jeff, a lot of people ask me and say, you know, what's going on with telecom today, and how should we be thinking about our strategy? And a lot of people ask me, you know, tell me what the strategy and future of wireline and wireless telecom is in 30 minutes. And that's a haiku that's just really hard to write, frankly. Yep. It's a very hard puzzle right now with many, many moving pieces. So the way I kind of like to challenge your audience to kind of think about this, think about kind of 3 or 4 specific areas. And if it's okay, let's flip to the first one. Is that okay with you, Jeff? I think one of the most important things to think about and it doesn't matter whether you're a mobile company thinking about this or you're a wireline company or an internet company in general thinking about it. I think most internet companies are kind of thinking about it, but we haven't really thought much about how your company is presented over a mobile device.
Would you call that the mobile first strategy?
Yeah, there are different names for it, but mobile first is kind of a good way to look at it. And we think about kind of what's happened in mobile over the past 5 to 7 years, right? So think of it as almost a pre-iPhone launch or pre-smartphone launch. You were lucky if you had a mobile device that would show you a full web page. You felt really kind of cool if you could get a full web page. Now when you get a full web page, you're like, ooh, I gotta move to make that screen bigger, right? And you're like, now where's the mobile version of that web page?
Yeah.
Think about it in a couple of different ways. Mobile brings with it actually a more complete set of information. That 5-inch view actually is packed with a lot more power than an 11-inch view, right? Which is a traditional laptop or traditional screen.
Yeah.
Mobile brings with it location, which is fundamentally different. Mobile brings with it social, which is fundamentally different. And mobile brings with it, just by nature, the ability to move. It's something that's constantly in motion. Said another way, think about what your life was like 5-10 years ago. So if you and I were to go to CES or go to CTIA or something like that, and we weren't familiar with what was going on at the show, we would be walking around with printed maps, courtesy of MapQuest, now owned by Verizon, right? Part of that family of companies they're buying from AOL, and we would be having step-by-step directions that were pre-printed. This is pre-Google Maps, right? Now, if you saw somebody do that, you would accuse them of being, kind of a brontosaurus, right? I mean, you consider him to be kind of a curmudgeon in the industry. And while we've seen a lot of those changes, whether it's how I get my stock quotes, how I get my airline tickets, or my boarding pass, how I get from Step 1 offices to here, for example, I'm not using the more traditional means. I'm using my mobile device to do it. And we've seen that change happen already. Now we're starting to think about what changes happen beyond that. And the question I pose to people, and I think it's one for this audience to kind of really think through, is what happens if the 11-inch screen goes away? How does your company present itself in a non-laptop, non-desktop world.
So again, going back to the topic of how to stand out at your corporate strategy meeting, what's the right question to ask, or what should folks be thinking of asking in terms of mobile first and what it means to a company?
What happened? And it's very simple. It's how does our company operate on a 5-inch screen? Because that's how a vast majority, especially if you operate in a global environment, that's how people look at your company.
So then the next question obviously is, where do you go to think about
What do you-
mobile design?
what do you
and
do?
Where do you do? Where
And,
do you
and
go?
why is it important, right? Because I'll tell you what happened, right? When mobile came around, and I was still at Sprint at the time, mobile came around, and we said, we're going to take everything that's on that 11-inch screen, and we're going to condense it. At that time, it wasn't a 5-inch screen, it was a 3-inch screen or a 3.5-inch screen. We felt real good when we moved to 4-inch screens, right? We're going to move everything that's in that, and we're going to let people kind of continue to zoom
Yep.
in. That's not going to work anymore. The whole concept of design needs to be looked at differently. One of the guys who I worked with at Sprint, he's kind of now on his own, I was a guy named Steven Huber. Steven kind of literally wrote a book called Mobile Design Interfaces, which is kind of the, for many people in the industry, is kind of the Bible, for how to design a really good mobile interface. He has a number of websites. The number 4, OURTH is one of his websites, which kind of goes through that in detail. But there's a lot going on. And what you have to understand in that, Jeff, is it's not about condensing from an 11-inch to a 4-inch screen, the same amount of content. It's about getting that content more efficient.
And a different experience,
And creating a different experience as a result of that. Nothing has forced, there was a great event this quarter, nothing has forced people to think more about mobile first than what Google did on, I think it was April 20th. I think it's called Mobilegeddon, right? Google's Mobilegeddon.
Well,
Because what they said
it's good
is,
to know, by the way, Jim, that we went to a responsive design site back in August.
that's right.
And during Mobilegeddon, we saw our traffic surge.
Well, that's because it's going to float to the top on any Google search. Now, I'll give you an example, and we'll talk about this in the company later on. What if I have trouble with my internet service at home, and I'm with Frontier, or I'm with Charter, or I'm with somebody who doesn't have a mobile-friendly site? How am I going to get help?
Yep.
I'm going to call customer service. That's what they're trying not to have you do, right? They're trying to allow you to have the tools to be able to empower themselves. But those two sites, if you go to them today, they're not mobile-friendly. If I go to Comcast, a great mobile-friendly experience. If I go to Time Warner, a good mobile-friendly experience. Go to Suddenlink, a good to great mobile experience, mobile-friendly experience. But people have to start to make that transition, and that's what one of the things that Mobile First is about. Mm-hmm. If you go to there's a slide that kind of talks about why, what Mobile First entails, but it also demands efficiency. And I think nowhere is that more apparent, and I'll use this as an example. Nowhere is that more apparent, Jeff, than in maps. So I'm lost, and I want to find my way, but I sure as heck can't find my way on a 2G interface.
Right.
Or a 4G that dips down to a 2G interface. Because there's so much going on with that application. It's amazing what's going on in that application. It's trying to give me alternate routes. It's trying to help me figure out, where I should make the right turns. Maybe it's trying to figure out if there's some hazard or something else, some construction going on or an accident or something else. That's changed dramatically in the way we look at this world.
Now you got a video you want to show us. We ready to jump to the video?
No, not yet.
Not yet?
Let's go on to the next time. Let's go on to the
Okay.
next question. The next thing, and this has been the issue in wireline for a long time, but I think is becoming much more of an issue in
Yeah.
wireless, is the fact that we already lived in an asset-intensive industry before Auction 97, which is also known as the AWS auctions, raised about $48 billion for
Big day for the
the
government.
IRS, or the Treasury, excuse me, the FCC. Raised it for somebody. And now they're sitting around that strategic planning session thinking, holy cow, I got an asset I gotta borrow money to get. I gotta pay that back. how do I earn a return for my shareholders on that asset, right? And what we've had in the mobile industry, in the wireless industry, for a long time is this we've trained the analyst community to think about EBITDA, because that's what matters. If I hit a service margin of 47% or higher, or 50% or higher in the case of Verizon, or whatever that is, and as long as it's increasing, that's great. What you're seeing now is, and what I think you'll see, and several of the analysts are already starting to work on this, is to say, hey, wait a second. How are you going to earn a return on all that debt you got? How are you going to earn a return on all those pension liabilities you got? How are you going to earn a return on all this plant that you have now? Where's that coming from? One of the most surprising things we'll be able to see, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall in their strategic planning session, is AT&T just spent $60 billion incremental for VIP.
Yep.
And they did a lot of great things, and they were very clear in articulating how they're going to do that.
For VIP, just for the audience, make sure everybody knows that $60 billion on VIP, what was that spent on?
Okay, so the first was really rolling out LTE.
That's a network upgrade.
It's a big network
program.
upgrade.
Yeah.
Big network upgrade. The other thing they did is they connected a lot of businesses with, right? And then they've just made a ton of improvements, right? And that set a platform for them to be able to, to buy DirecTV. It's been a platform for them to be able to integrate Mexico into their operation, right? They needed that in order to be able to do it. But at the same time, whatever their cost of capital is, let's say it's 8%, just for grins, that's $4.8 billion of additional net operating profit after tax they have to generate. Well, think about what that is on how much EBITDA that they have to translate. Right. We were already asset intensive, and we just turned that up a notch, right? To use a Spinal Tap analogy, the asset intensity in the industry is about to hit 11, right? we really are at that point right now, Jeff, and the wireline guys have been around it all along. They're very familiar with that, and what that is forcing the industry to do is to really prioritize what's important. One of the companies I work with is a great company. It's called Curvature. It's a client. They're starting up a new business, and they, specialize in going in and helping companies figure out where they need to spend assets. Spend money on assets. Yeah. And they've been real successful recently, and much to Cisco's chagrin, they've been very successful recently in having companies say, you are end of sale on that particular asset, but it sure as heck ain't end of life. So let's figure out how we extend the life of that asset. It's not a critical asset for you. It might be a 4600 router. It's not a critical asset for you. So let's help you figure out how to extend the life so you can take that capital, what IDC calls the innovation dividend. Let's take that capital and spend it on things that are going to generate a really good return.
Now, when they look at deploying capital, can you talk about how they view subsidies on phones as relates to that investment in capital?
Yeah, it's a really good. So in the old model, and what we call the pay $199 get an iPhone model, right? So that all went against period expense, right? And that's why when the fourth quarter came and Apple did a phone launch, we'd see this giant hit to margins, right? Right. Now, depending on the company, right, you're taking the hit to the service margin. In Sprint's case, if you lease a phone, that's starting to get thrown into capital as well, right? But for the rest of the industry, it's more a hit to service margin because they're not taking that more lumpy hit, and it's time. Yep. They're not taking the lumpy hit that you would see in the previous postpaid world.
Mm-hmm. So you're working with a couple Austin companies, or at least one in particular. You want to talk a little bit about that? And I do want to get back to the video that we want to show that ties back to
we're going to show that in just a second.
Ties back to design, but tell us about the company you're working with here.
So company I've been working with here is about been working with about 3 years. And that's kind of the third question as you think about it in a strategic planning sense, and that is, if big data is such hot stuff, right? So this is more what happens when the IT guys and marketing guys kind of get together and they're talking about analytics and how we can use better analytics to drive more understanding of our customers' profiles, to drive more sales, right? And I in one of the slides we kind of talked briefly about, it's like a figure 8 slide, right? It's basically buy, get, use, kind of that format. And there are 3,000 companies today, many of whom are in Austin, focused on I'm gonna learn more about prospective customers, right? Just think mobile marketing, right?
And we've got a slide on this, right?
Yeah, we do.
We got a little figure 8 slide.
Yeah.
Yep.
And step one's a little bit different. This is the company that's based in Austin. Step one's a little bit different. They say once you bought, now I have to make a decision about how this thing all really works, right? I get my first bill if it's a service company, or something goes wrong and I'm still in warranty and it's a product. How do I work with that, right? And what step one does, and this is more for more mass market than as opposed to a specialized product, is they match up for companies all the self-service content that they've invested in over the past several years. And companies have invested lots of money in building these, really nice YouTube videos that, quite frankly, nobody looks at.
What? Ours get looked at a lot.
Yeah, but
65,000 video views a month.
I won't give you the cable company's name, but a well-known cable company who many of us would die to not call customer service
Right.
in order to call. They have a grand total. They've had it up for 3 years. They've had a grand total of 50,000 views of how to self-install your broadband.
Right. And how many customers do they have?
Many millions.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where the content's there. It's beautiful. It's actually accurate. And I'd love to know that it was there. But I don't know that it's there. Because when I think of service and I think of a cable company, I think of pick up the phone and call.
Yep.
And so what step one does is it matches that up, integrates it into their current mobile strategy, and provides predictive self-service. Their specialty is they're really good data scientists. So they're good at matching context, which is on day of install, I'm installing these services, and I've got this self-help content. And by the way, you're probably going to want to know where your tech is.
Yep.
So it serves that all up over a mobile device or a web screen or something else before you call, which
So
is a
if I'm the
really, really
subscriber,
big deal.
how do I know to look at my device to begin with for self-help?
Oh, you may have already been prompted to sign up for service. You may have just gone to the website and maybe enter your phone number in, and they already have your phone number. Some way of qualifying you. They're not snooping on you, right? They have to provide some qualification in order to personalize your service.
Mm-hmm.
But once they personalize your service, your customer experience is fundamentally different. There's a website, a video here. I think we ought to probably show at this point. Why don't you roll that video real quick?
On properties.
We've got about 2.5 million broadband customers. So how do we get customers the right service experience and using the data that we've got across many, many systems?
So if a customer has an issue they need to resolve, a typical customer will try and help themselves, but usually they'll give up and call us. As well. We really want to make the online experience the sort of first port of call for people. The work we're doing with Step One really helps us solve some of those problems.
We'll be able to save a lot of inbound phone calls to the tech support center with this kind of technology, so that gives us an immediate cost reduction. But more important is the customer advocacy effect. What Step One's brought to the partnership really is quite powerful.
Effectively, the way Step One works is it takes whatever context data we have about the customer, what do we know about that customer at that particular time they're asking for help, and then matches it up with the most likely web content that's going to solve that issue for them. So it's quite a lot better than a traditional search function. It's actually giving that personalised experience. And if we don't get it right the first time, then the system will learn, and next time someone asks in a similar situation, we'll give them more effective content. Now a customer can get help with the click of a button on their computer at home or on their mobile through our Telstra 24/7 app.
Actually, I was surprised at how quickly we got the solution up and running. Big telco takes a while to get things out and do them right, but working with Step One is actually quite easy. We want the customer really not to have to think about where to get help. They can walk over to their device, which has a tag on it, and scan, tap, or text for help. We know who the customer is, we know information about their service.
We'll make the experience with Telstra much more fluid, and therefore customers can focus on having fun with the products they bought from us, like watching TV or surfing the net or listening to music.
The main thing I like about the new system is really that it's tailored for our customers to answer the questions they want to ask and do it with minimum customer effort. So that's really the power of it.
And your camera's that one. Yeah.
that kind of gives you a pretty good idea as to what Step One does. You know, I really like the part. There's a fellow named Troy in that video, and he says, if we don't get it right the first time, the system will learn, right? And that's the purpose of this. One of the founders of Step One says, he says, Google doesn't sit around writing a bunch of rules-based, you know, for every time you search. It doesn't say, if Jeff enters this, then show him this. Now, Google works to say, he entered this, I've got this inventory, what makes the most sense to show, right? That's the same way Step One works, but it works on that way for service,
Right.
right? As opposed to today, which is, if you ask about high-speed data, you get these questions. And, you know, I think this is very disruptive. I think it's...
So what pain point is it really solving for the cable company or mobile operator?
Well, first of all, it's got a huge impact on the customer experience, because you're now allowing the customer to be able to solve their own problems, right? And customers have been wanting to do that, quite frankly, because the pain they experience every time they call customer service, it's a pretty bad experience, right?
Yep.
The ACSI scores, consumer report scores, you know, kind of all bear that out. But the other piece that it does is, and this is why it works so well, is it's a great ROI, because when you take away a call to care, you take away, you know, $5 to $7, right? And the ROI is very good for them, very good. It's not a hard financial case to prove in. It's more a coordination, because, you know, each company is in a different place in that self-service journey.
Okay. So why don't we go back and recap the three
Yeah.
key questions to ask?
So think about it this way. How does my company look on a 5-inch screen, right?
Yep.
That's a big deal. And if your company's not thinking about that, start thinking about it now. Start thinking about that right away.
Yeah.
Because how you do business is going to change fundamentally. And a lot more of what we do is going to happen over a smaller screen. Second question is, especially for the wireless industry, is how are we using our assets? What are we spending our money on? Because Spectrum's taken a big chunk of the capital away for quite several years to come. And by the way, we have that little 600 megahertz auction coming up for next year, right? So utilizing assets is going to become, it was already important, and what we call asset turns, which kind of mirrors with profitability to determine return on invested capital.
Yep.
That was already important, but it's going to become even more important. It's going to go up a notch.
Asset turn.
Asset turn. And then the third part is, if big data is such hot stuff, why can't it answer my customers' questions before they ask them? And that's where companies like Step One, I think, really come in. They're you know, each company's going to be at a different point in that journey, but there are easy ways today to improve that customer experience, because the companies already have the information. It's just having a system to be able to put together context and content.
One final question I want to ask you is, you work with wireline companies, you work with cable companies,
I do.
you work with mobile operators. Where do they see content? And you're seeing this unbundling. So what are your thoughts on content, and who owns the customer, and what do you think Verizon's going to be doing with their AOL assets? What do you think AT&T is going to be doing with their investment by way of Scherning Group in full screen? What's your view of content?
Well, it's as I've written about several times. They're not, and wireless companies are not acting in the same manner on this. Right? There are companies that are taking more of a manner of, if I just get bigger, whatever content comes around, I know I'm going to get a fair price, and I'll be able to play in the market. That's one group. Verizon's a little different. Verizon's like, I'm going to be a broadcaster, right? Not a broadcaster in the traditional sense of how you think of NBC and lots of content creation and all that kind of stuff. What they're saying is, I'm going to make it easy for people to come onto my network with content. And I may do some content too. You know, it sounds like, from what I heard today, that they're going to keep the Huffington Post.
That was news.
That definitely is news, right? That's a surprise. It's an eyebrow raiser for me. You know,
Yep.
I didn't expect it. I'll be surprised to see how they keep TechCrunch in the process, but maybe they will. Maybe they'll figure out how to keep that all independent.
Don't forget Engadget.
And Engadget, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that envelops. Where I do see this headed is the content is going to be much more personalized, right? So last night was a big basketball game, right? Big
I do remember, yeah.
a little basketball game.
Yep.
Stephon Curry,
Yep.
Davidson grad.
Yep.
You know, I'm a Davidson grad, so very
Shameless plug.
shameless plug for Davidson College right there. But that was a big event, and millions of people watched that event.
Yep.
But just as important to many people is going to be the ability to watch their son or daughter's, lacrosse event. And that's going to now be possible. That broadcasting ability is now going to be possible. That wasn't possible before. And that's somebody's going to get rich off that. Local broadcast content's going to be what apps developers were in the Apple era.
Right.
Now we're going to see people blossoming out into local content production. Verizon's going to enable that.
Okay. How about DirecTV? Where does that content fit? And how about the unbundling of content for the cable companies? What does that mean for them?
Well, in that first camp, Jeff, that you were talking about, I think AT&T and DirecTV, first of all, though, they will have the most number of subs, right?
Yep.
So where Comcast did before, Comcast enjoyed most favored nation, status for many, many years. AT&T and DirecTV will now enjoy that. The question is, for what? Right? They can enjoy that for, a very large sporting event. And with DirecTV, of course, they'll enjoy that for the NFL, at least for the foreseeable future. But are they going to enjoy it for a lot of this other content?
Yep.
And if that other content all of a sudden turns into, I call it 1,000 points of light, but it's 1,000 points of profit, for Verizon, AT&T is going to have to examine adding that strategy to the one they already have today. AT&T is much different. AT&T's content's going to, and their reach is going to be much different than Verizon's. Mexico proves it, and I don't think, judging from comments that were made last week, I don't think they're going to change that anytime soon.
Okay. Well, Jim, we are out of time. We have Emily Wolf, a local Austin singer-songwriter, coming up in just a minute. Emily, thank you for being patient. We hope folks will stick around. There'll be a different live stream feed, so you'll switch over to a different stream. But I got to ask you, in closing, what do you think of the new RCR ATX Studio Lounge?
This is absolutely fantastic. This is very, very nice.
Well, thanks for coming by. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
The RCR ATX Studio Lounge comes to you from the RCR Wireless News headquarters in Austin, Texas. If you are interested in holding your event at the RCR Lounge or dropping by for an interview, please contact Lindsay Franklin at lfranklin@rcrwireless.com.